Imagine a world where you did not have to choke. Maybe not in the literal sense, but imagine a world where you could perform no matter the circumstances. A world where even though you are one goal down, you can still drill the last shot. In this hypothetical scenario, success is encapsulated solely by talent, and not the ability to perform under pressure. This doesn't guarantee perfect performance either. Instead, avoiding chokes revolves around performing at a top level regardless of underlying pressures and stress. Welcome to another episode of Gaming Keystones. Today, I'm going over the art of choking and how gaming provides an environment where choking runs rampant. Believe it or not, these chokes don't just happen, but they're inevitable. Whether the enemy team has 4 players remaining or just 1, the stress that comes with having to close out a fight can easily impair performance and decrease productivity. As a boss runs nearly out of health, I find myself playing differently, pushing myself to finish the job. However, this may not always be the best strategy. Sometimes, the pressure that comes from nearly finishing off a fight roots itself in my brain, and I make a bad judgment. I'm often clouded with the nearing sense of victory that I fail to recognize that this is not over, and that I may in fact lose. Cognitive scientist Jan Beilock talks about this in her TED Talk, and most likely in her book, though I haven't gotten a chance to read it yet. She focuses a lot on choking, and mentions that stress plays a large role in most people's lives. Specifically, she studied soccer players. In her studies, she had these athletes dribble a ball. Then, she compared having them dribble a ball naturally against having them dribble a ball and announce which side of the foot that they were using to keep the ball up. She mentioned that increasing the amount of stimulus required of each player made them perform more poorly. And this makes sense. Any amount of multitasking will force people to lose focus when compared to solely being focused on one task. It's a very important understanding. People do not often recognize the impacts that externalities have on them. And this is very easy to see in gaming. It's hard to play well when the sun gets in your eyes, or when the dog is barking, or when someone walks in front of the TV. Things like this clearly impact the gaming experience and force players to adapt on the fly, taking their focus away from the game itself and leading to that previously aforementioned choke. While this is effectively what she's talking about, gaming is a lot more complex. Sometimes, within a game, there are multiple layers of stress. Sometimes 2 teams will push simultaneously. In Blue Reflection's Second Light, battle health isn't restored after a fight, so long-term longevity is almost as important as winning the fight is. In Injustice, I need to learn how to use my character and how to avoid the capabilities of my opponent. Whatever 2 ideas are clashing in my mind will force me to deviate their focus from the primary task at hand. This sucks, right? I mean, how could I ever recover from not being able to focus on one thing? Well, I don't think so. In fact, one of the main reasons that gaming is so engrossing to me is that many games do not have only one thing to consider. In Last Command, I need to both collect pieces of data and avoid enemy bullets simultaneously. In Monopoly Madness, I need to collect both money for myself and prevent my opponents from doing so. Games constantly introduce players to multiple objectives, tasks, and other things to learn. It's impossible to focus on one thing objectively. My obsession with gaming divides me a little from the conclusions that Beilock derives. She mentions that there are techniques that can be done to mitigate the effects of choking, and one technique that she mentions is that not thinking about actions brings increased performance and chance of success. Though this is not Beilock's sole claim, I don't think it's viable in the context of gaming. It is nearly impossible to turn the brain off while gaming. However, what she is saying does have some relevance. Obviously, it would be challenging to manually think through each of my button inputs in the middle of a fight in Phantom Breaker's Omnia. Trust me, it is. But games are not designed the way that real-life events are. There is not one universal skill set that can be adapted to all games at all times. Games feature distinct enemies with unique weaknesses and abilities that must be learned manually. Additionally, unlike soccer and test taking, which are the primary focuses of her study, there's no clear dichotomy between studying time and game time. When I'm playing a game, I want to win every time. Regardless of how many runs I perform in a roguelite, I try to believe that this run will lead me to victory. Yet I still find myself looking to unlock permanent upgrades for future runs. I can't just focus on one, or I'll make little progress in both areas. Combining both strategies and thinking about my actions is a key component to clearing any game. Similarly, despite having solid strategy in Downwell, I can constantly improve my solution to get more gems and bring a better position in later floors. Even in single-player games, new strategies to take out enemies can make gaming much more dynamic and enjoyable. Instead, the second solution that Bylok provides is much more feasible. She mentions that it's imperative to practice learning under pressure, and that to avoid the choke, you have to become familiar with it. Then, you won't choke. While maybe this is idealistic, I see a lot of developers implementing this strategy. For example, in Elden Ring, upon my death I lose my souls, which basically serve as experience points. This means I must backtrack through an area without dying to retrieve them if I want to use them for upgrades. Further, if I die, the souls will be lost for good. It's a stressful situation. Every time I act, I consider the extra pressure that these souls place on me. And I'm not gonna lie, I think I hate it. However, I'm only around 15 hours into the game. As I continue with this pressure, I may become more accustomed to it, like Bylok mentions. However, I'm not sure whether it's the same thing. The improvement Bylok mentions come from practicing under stressful situations and then testing under the same conditions, but now being used to the pressure. However, when I lose things I work for in the game, regardless of how menial they are, I feel bad, as though I lost something I worked for, as though the things I lost were the end result. The games that I play typically don't force me to rehearse in the way that some games do. Professional speedrunners, Geometry Dash players, or even shoot 'em up fans need to practice levels extensively, so maybe then they crumble under the pressure in the way that Bylok describes. However, I think most games not only force you to multitask and learn on the fly, but constantly put you in situations where you have the potential to choke. In fact, games consistently put you in stressful, intense situations throughout the experience, and even across games. So while to me, the arbitrary life counter in Super Mario Bros. 3 is disappointing, the feature undoubtedly adds pressure, and keeps pressure consistent. Plus, while games typically do not have specific practice segments so that people can focus on getting their choking anxiety out of the way, the skill sets amassed in one game can often transfer to another. Frequently playing games certainly has increased my threshold for choking, even outside of gaming. Practicing in these simulated high-pressure situations developed a lot of techniques to avoid choking myself, even if it doesn't work every time. While there was not necessarily one key takeaway from this video, I think it's important to recognize that we will choke. We will be pressured to perform tasks at a high level, and we will often fail because of that. Still, it doesn't mean that it's a bad thing. Every moment in life is a learning experience from which we can grow, develop, and learn. Even if that experience is something as simple as choking against the last squad. Thank you so much for watching.